Welcome to Sab's podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. My special guest today is Scott Ritter. He's an American author, a former United States Marine Corps intelligence officer, and a former United Nations Special Commission's weapons inspector. Welcome back, Scott.
Well, thanks for having me.
So I'm sure, as you know, Alexei Navalny died this week. So that's been the hot news topic. And it was really interesting to me how many people just aren't really aware of who this guy actually is. So I'm sure if you've seen mainstream media, they've been praising Navalny. They said that he was a hero, so to speak, because he was Putin's opposition. I want to hear a little bit from you about who he really is. And one of the things that I've mentioned to people was that he had very terrible views about Muslim people. I've told people that he was a nationalist. I've explained that he was actually a CIA asset, but I want to hear a little bit from you because I think mainstream media has really run with this narrative that he was this hero, so to speak, just because he was Putin's opposition.
Well, first of all, let's just correct her. He's not Putin's opposition. That's like me saying that Joseph Greenwald is Joe Biden's opposition. Now, the proper sponsor view is Joseph who? That's the point. How can somebody who doesn't register on any political map be opposition? Navalny at his height could generate 2%, maybe 5% at his best day support. That's not opposition. That's nothing. So to call him a political opposition, that's a fiction created by his Western handlers. That's what they wanted him to become. But the reality is that in Russia, Navalny was not somebody who had this huge, massive following. Sure, there were people who did follow him. There's a less today, but because they sort of self-purged after the special military operation, around 200,000 young Russian men mainly fled Russia because they didn't want to get caught up in the war. No, they were Navalny supporters, and Russia was like, good riddance. Enjoy it. And the irony is most of them want to come back because they realize that the West had been lying to them the entire time. And the interesting thing about Russia is they're like, okay, come on back. We understand. We understand what happened to you. We get it. You were wrong. Hopefully you've seen the light. You're welcome to come home. But Navalny was never a viable political opposition. Navalny was, as you said, he was a white racist. Graduated from law school, got involved in opposition politics early on, initially against Yeltsin. I mean, that's when he was opposed to Yeltsin and the corruption. Look, Russia was extraordinarily corrupt. Some people would say continues to be corrupt, and I'm not going to debate that issue. Less corrupt today than it was when Navalny first started. Huge amounts of corruption. And he was trying to identify who he was, how he could resonate with a youth movement. And so he jumped all in on, nationalism, the ugly kind of nationalism. He was against Muslims. He's against Central Asians. He was against Georgians. My wife is Georgian. He called Georgians rodents. So you can understand that my first inclination, if I ever was to have met Navalny, would have been to knock his teeth out. Because you called my wife a rodent, and nobody calls my wife a rodent. But that's who he was. So we're not talking about a high class individual here. He got caught up in a CIA and British intelligence sponsored effort in starting in 2005 to try and push Putin out of power in the 2007-2008 electoral cycle. Now, again, the reason why I want to bring this up is Americans, you remember 2016, right? You remember Russiagate and the whole, Trump collusion. And today we know it was all a lie. But my point is, many of us, rightly so, took umbrage at the thought of the Russians trying to, influence an American election. That's our job. Americans, we vote for it. We don't want anybody, except the Israelis, but that's a different issue. We don't want anybody buying an American election, a foreign power. I'm telling you right now that the CIA and British intelligence put millions of dollars into Russia at this time to get people like Alexei Navalny to mobilize to try and take down Vladimir Putin and Dmitry Medvedev. It was an attempted color revolution. It failed, but that was the first go. Navalny was a minor player during that time. After that, after the failure, he got on with his new job, which was to be what he called a shareholder activist. He bought a couple $1,000s worth of stock in major companies. And now as a stockholder, he got to go in and demand access to their documents, to insist on transparency. And he did this to embarrass them. Some people say he did it as a shakedown, an effort to get bought off. There's no direct evidence of that, but there's indirect evidence because we do know that Navalny was involved in a very ugly scheme involving a lumber company in the Kirov region, 800 and some odd miles northeast of Moscow in 2009, where he went in and he was involved in massive fraud, setting up a front company as a lumber trading middleman to get lumber provided at a low price to sell at a high price and keep a 7% commission. The very corruption that he claimed he was fighting, he was doing to make money. I mean, that's how Russia was operating back then. So, we know that he's not this whistle clean person, that he is capable of fraud. He was convicted on it. That's why he was in jail, by the way, for this and other fraudulent schemes and other. He's a criminal class. But that's not how America treated him. No, we decided that we wanted to carry out another regime change operation in 2012 to keep Vladimir Putin from returning as the president of Russia. In order to do that, the idea was that you had to destroy the credibility of Putin so that Dmitry Medvedev, who was the president, would want to stay in and wouldn't participate in the swap arrangement where Putin becomes president, Medvedev becomes the prime minister. And this is where Navalny got in. He got tapped to go to the Yale World's Fellow Program in 2010, class of 2010. Here he was recruited by the CIA. The National Resources Division uses fellowships like this to evaluate people and to bring them over to the dark side. And while I can't say I have a signed contract from Navalny saying I want to work for the CIA, what I can say is that while he was at Yale in November, he began the campaign that he would later on run. So he's in the United States. He admits that he's being mentored by people who are encouraging him to do this. And he begins a campaign by releasing documents about corruption in a major oil company. He comes back to Russia in December of 2010 and continues this. And now he's blogging. And suddenly, because of Yale, this is why they did it, he's plugged in everywhere. He now has influential people coming around him, people giving him money. The CIA is funneling money. His deputy was caught on tape in 2011 asking for 10 to 15 million dollars from British intelligence, what we needed to get this done, to get this election overturned. He's on tape meeting a British intelligence officer saying, I need 10 to 12 million dollars to accomplish what you want me to do in terms of regime change. That's Navalny's deputy. That's the organization that Navalny created, working for British intelligence. Ladies and gentlemen, the man is a traitor, a straight up traitor, and he got a traitor's death. He died in prison. But it gets even more ridiculous than this, because now he starts his campaign to take down Putin, and you don't think that this is going to cause problems. So what the Russians did is they said, Navalny. Oh, he's that corrupt dude from Kirov that did that timber thing. Why don't we prosecute him? And so now they take him to court. And he gets found guilty, and it starts this whole lengthy process where now the West is saying, no, he's our man. We got to call him the Mr. Democracy. So they're building Navalny up to be this big dude, when in fact, he's just a common criminal. That's all he is. He's a common criminal, carried out an extortion scheme, got convicted, and supposed to go to jail. But they give him a suspended sentence. Why? Because they need him to continue undermining Putin. And he's getting ready to do the third coup d'etat, which is in 2021, to stop the constitutional reforms that Putin's doing, because Putin is looking around saying, I got the CIA, I got the British intelligence, I got other people trying to take over democratic movements in Russia. So I need to bomb-proof the system against this outside interference. And he did it with constitutional reforms that solidified the Russian state, kept him in power so he could continue this work without disruption. It made it impossible for people like Navalny to break in. That's the last thing the CIA wanted. So they're saying, Navalny, please take this guy down. So Navalny's mobilizing for that, but he can't. He's a criminal. He's a criminal, and no Russians taking him seriously. So what happens? Do you remember when he was poisoned, the Novichok case? Remember he fell down on an airplane and was evacuated? Novichok, the world's most dangerous chemical weapon. I mean, one sniff and you're dead. Well, one sniff and we're all dead. It's so deadly, so deadly. You even think about Novichok and you die. But apparently he drank it in his tea, drank it in his water, had it put in his underwear, and he didn't die. He fell down on the airplane. Navalny went boom, and they evacuated him out to Germany, where the German government does a secret test and says it's Novichok, but will never release the results. It was done in a military laboratory. The doctors on the other end who are treating Navalny, who are taking the blood and all that stuff, come out and they've released it. There's no evidence of Novichok. He wasn't poisoned by Novichok. What apparently happened is that he deliberately overdosed on antidepressants. It's all in his medical chart. So he popped the pills to collapse, to be evacuated, to create the fiction of a Novichok poisoning. Now he's in Germany. He has a miraculous recovery. Remember, this is a chemical that kills on contact. Like I said, even if you think Novichok, don't spell it right because you'll die. It's so dangerous. But he miraculously recovers. But while he's in his hallucinatory state in the hospital, he says, I want to make a documentary film that attacks Putin. And then in December, he and a 20-man crew show up at a German intelligence safe house in the Black Forest where the CIA is waiting for him. And they make not one, but two documentaries. Now, Sabby, I've made a documentary film, In Shifting Sands. It took me almost a year to make it.
Yeah.
And it cost a lot of money, and it takes a lot of time. He made not one, but two documentaries in 1 month. 1 month. And we're talking about finished product, done. One was called Putin's Palace. And this was the expose of exposés showing how corrupt Putin is, destroy Putin's reputation, the whole thing. The second one's called Navalny. You might have heard about it. It won an Oscar. It's a slick production thing that's supposed to elevate Navalny from the common criminal that he really is into this glorious leader, this masterful man capable of leading Russia. In fact, he says there, I can lead Russia. I can do this. So 2 movies. Now, Navalny's in the Black Forest. The CIA has done this, and the Russians know it. The funny thing is in October, when Navalny was having his miraculous recovery, Dmitry Peskov said to the public, he said, we know who he's with. We know it's the CIA. We know what he's doing. It wasn't a secret. I mean, everybody knew what he was doing. Everybody knows who he is. Everybody knows who he worked for. But Navalny didn't figure that out. The CIA's plan now is to return Navalny to Russia, where he's going to go to court. He's going to get a suspended sentence, or at worst, a year of prison for parole violation. But while he's there, after he'd been arrested, they released the first movie, Putin's Palace. Now, this movie was supposed to take Putin down. It was supposed to destroy Putin's reputation, make him run and hide in shame. And then people would say, well, Navalny did that. Then they released the second movie, and it says Navalny is the leader of leaders. He is the man that Russia can turn to save them from the evil Vladimir Putin. Navalny is the guy. That was the plan. But Putin went, he's not only going to go to jail for the parole, but we're bringing up other criminal cases. And because his team's taking money from the CIA and everything, trying to overthrow us, we're going to charge him with extremism. And Navalny went from a 5-year suspended sentence to a 30-year sentence, which is a life sentence in prison. He's going to spend the rest of his life in jail. Now, the CIA has invested too much money in this to have their asset disappear. It's not me saying this. There's a Russian who's dating Navalny's wife. That's a whole nother issue that we don't want to get into because that's personal. I don't care. We'll float your boat. But, but he is on record 4 days beforehand talking about, Navalny's no good to us anymore. And the only way Navalny can become politically relevant is if there's some sort of emergency situation at prison. Could he be talking about 4 days beforehand? 2 days before Navalny dies, he gets visitors. Still uncertain who visited him, but somebody visited him. And they gave him medication and gifts. 2 days later, Navalny drops dead. Now, people will say, that's just, Scott, you can't go there. You can't connect the dots. But what I will say this, that his wife was at the Munich Security Conference, ready with a pre-written speech. Everybody was there. There was a script. It was already written. The CIA had already done its job. So when Navalny died, she's there. And you saw, I mean, I've been around. Look, this is where it gets personal, but I was with my wife when her mother died. It is the most distraughtful thing. She lost the ability to speak. She was in sorrow. I mean, and the same thing when her father died, the same thing. I mean, my God, the woman was destroyed. She still is. I mean, we're talking years later. And if she thinks about her parents, she tears up. She can't talk. She loved them that much. I only hope that when I die, she feels that way about me. But the point is, that's, if you love somebody, that's how you respond. Right. She's there all dolled up, and she's like, and she's even smiling. She barely suppressed the smirk. I saw it, and I know everybody else saw it. She's sitting there. She gives a speech. She's the hero. Hillary Clinton's there. Of course she is. Tony Blinken's there. Kamala Harris is there. Everybody's there saying Navalnaya, the wife, is the heir apparent. We have found the person to replace Navalny. The spirit of Navalny lives. We have sanctions coming in. Everything. Navalny is alive. Everything the CIA wanted is happening because Navalny died, and they were able to replace this criminal, this traitor, with a new symbol. So what I think happened, and I talk about this, I'm writing an article about this, and normally I don't like to go down this route. I'm a very fact-based person, but you got to connect the dots right now. And have you seen Godfather 2?
I have.
Yeah, Frankie Pentangela, the guy the traitor, and his brother comes in from Sicily and stares at him, and Frankie changes his tune, and he's not going to betray the family, but he did betray the family. So now he's there, and Tom comes in, the consigliere of Michael Corleone comes in, Robert Duvall's character, great character, and they meet. They're smoking cigars, and Duvall says, back in, we modeled ourselves after the Roman Empire, after the Romans, the family, when we organized the families, we did it in the model of the Romans. We had, regimes, we had capos, we had soldiers. He's like, yeah, those were the good days. Yeah. He said, but when you betrayed Caesar, you had to kill you. There was a price you had to pay. It was killing yourself. So yeah, it's for the rich men, but not for people like me. They come in, they take the family, they put everybody in the street, and unless they killed themselves. Say they went into the tub and they opened up their veins and they just fell asleep and they died. And Tommy says, Frankie says, my family will be, and he says, everything's going to be okay. Your family's going to be okay. Frankie Five Angels, you have nothing to worry about. I think Navalny was told, your family's going to be okay. We're going to take care of everything. His daughter got a free ride to Stanford. She has the world is her oyster now. Michael McFaul, who sponsored her thing, Michael McFaul, who got her father involved in the CIA garbage to begin with, Michael McFaul, who betrayed Navalny, who got Navalny killed, is going to take care of his daughter. She will never want for work. Neither will his son. And his wife has been elevated now. She's there. The family has been taken care of. You don't have anything to worry about, Frankie Five Angels. That's Navalny. And I think Navalny overdosed on medicine deliberately and killed himself. That's what I think happened. Now, we'll find out what the truth is eventually, but the Russians are holding on to the body. They're concerned about some chemicals in the body, that there is some chemical imbalance that caused this guy to have sudden death. I think it's related to the same chemical imbalance that caused him to collapse on the airplane. Self-induced over-medication. And it makes sense because the timing, you can't explain how all the pieces fell in place. They knew that something was going to happen. They knew that he was going down. They were ready for this event. So there's where I stand on Navalny. He's a traitor. You can call him a tragic traitor. I do in my article. I say that it's the death of a tragic traitor. It is a tragedy. This is a man who thought the CIA would take care of him. But the CIA kept saying, you need to kill yourself. And here's just a word of advice to everybody out there. Never trust the CIA. Never trust the FBI. Never trust the U.S. government. They are not looking out for your interests. They're only going to use you to achieve a different objective, an objective that will not enrich you, will not empower you. You are just a tool to be discarded. And Navalny found that out. He found out at the end He's just a tool, and he was no longer useful. And that his wife is going to find out the same thing. She thinks she's everything that is right now. She's a tool, and when she becomes inconvenient, my guess is that she's going to spend her final days in life, alone in a seedy apartment building surrounded by cats who are going to eat her face off when she dies. That's her fate, because she's not going to be this great heroic figure that she thinks she is. She has no credibility in Russia. Right now, Vladimir Putin is going to roll into this election next month, and he's going to stomp everybody. Not because it's corrupt, not because he stole the election. It's because he's the most popular politician in the modern history of Russia, because he has saved Russia. Tucker Carlson went there, and I think Tucker did a little bit of a show there as opposed to real in depth, but Tucker said certain things. Life is good in Russia. It is good in Russia, and the people know it. Most of the people who are alive today in Russia were alive in the 1990s, and they know what it was when the United States came in and raped the land, stole their profits, didn't care about the people, allowed the population to decline, millions of people to die, trying to destroy Russia. And they know that that's not what's happening today. And there's one man and one man only who is responsible for that, and his name is Vladimir Putin. So Vladimir Putin is going to win this election because he's the most popular politician. You can't call Navalny opposition because there is no opposition. Literally, if Navalny was able to get his name on the ballot, he would have gotten less than 2% support.
Interesting, because there's another piece here that I feel like was really revealing from Nancy Pelosi. So I feel like, again, they planned this all out. This is what I've been wondering, like they planned this all out. This statement here from Nancy Pelosi, I thought was really revealing. I'm going to play this clip here.
This is 60 years of the Munich conference. Just what you know is this Munich Security Conference. Many of us were drawn to it by John McCain in a bipartisan way for our transatlantic alliance, our support for NATO, our support for the people of Ukraine for a long time now, not just since 2 years, but when the Russians invaded Crimea before, and even before that with the threat of it. So this was an important meeting. And the Russians, I believe, Putin decided to assassinate Navalny while we were in that meeting. It was.
So you think he did it on purpose?
A decision that he made then.
Right, because all the cards just happened to line up the way that they wanted them to. They don't have any evidence that Vladimir Putin killed Navalny, but Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, they've all made statements as though this is fact.
Now, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't play one on TV, and I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, so I can't fake it. But I do understand there's a Latin phrase that lawyers like to throw around, and I'm probably going to mispronounce it, but it's a cui bono, I think it is. But who benefits? Who benefits? That's one of the first questions you have to ask when you see a crime. A good investigator just says, who benefits from this? Why would this occur? Vladimir Putin does not benefit at all from this, at all. There's no benefit in this. Fact is, if you look at the Bild is a major German publication. They put out a story. Again, you have to be careful with these stories until they get corroborated. But they say that their information, and the Germans would know because they're involved. They say that the CIA was in active discussions with Russian intelligence to swap Navalny for a Russian in German custody, a Russian who assassinated somebody in Berlin a couple years ago, a war criminal who ran trucks over heads. Vladimir Putin talked about it during his interview with Tucker Carlson. The Russians really want this guy to come back because they view him as a patriot. They said he went out and he killed a man who murdered Russian prisoners of war by running trucks over their heads. And so he killed them. But now the Germans have him. He's in jail forever. And the Russians want him back. And here's the interesting thing, too. This is the other thing. Because when Putin talked about it, he said that our services, our special services are talking to one another. This is something that they do. If Navalny wasn't a CIA asset, why is the CIA negotiating for his release? That would be a State Department problem. We know because there's I think his name Michael Whalen, the Marine that's in prison over there, arrested on espionage charges. But everybody in the United States says no, he wasn't a spy, and he probably wasn't. He was just incompetent. But the Russians, The CIA is not there advocating for him. They are advocating for Gershwitz, the Evan Gershwitz, the Wall Street Journal guy. Why would the CIA be advocating for a Wall Street Journal reporter? Because he's a CIA agent. He was working unofficial cover. Oh, I get it now. And the CIA was advocating for Navalny, if this report is true as well. Because the Germans and the Americans were saying, this guy that assassinated somebody, there has to be a heavy price for him. We're not just going to get him for Evan. We want Navalny. We want 2 for 1. And there was negotiations going, and Putin's like, I think we're going to hear something about this. This guy's not going to be in jail forever. So Putin is like, I want this guy out of German prison. I got these chips that I want to trade for them. Why would you kill the chip? You wouldn't. Putin knows that the Munich Security Conference is convening at a time when the Russians just destroyed the Ukrainians at Avdiivka, the big defeat of the Ukrainian army. Thousands of prisoners, thousands of dead. They lost the most heavily fortified position in their possession, a position they've held since 2014. The Russians have punched through the line. The Russians are making advances everywhere. Ukraine is collapsing. The West is in disarray. Congress won't release money. Europe is desperate. They're trying to find solutions. The Munich Security Conference is going to expose all of this failure, expose it all. And if you're Putin, you're like, let it happen, baby. Sometimes you don't even have to do something. You just have to sit back and go, let her ride. And that's what he was saying in Munich Security Conference. Just let it go. You guys are doing all the work for me. You're making it easy for me because you're so incompetent. And it's just this gathering of incompetent people confronted with their failures, until Navalny changed the tenor of everything. Now everybody's rallying, and the death of Navalny is why we have to get that money released for Ukraine. Navalny has nothing to do with Ukraine, but that's a different issue altogether. But my point is, cui bono, who benefits? Only the West benefited from this death. Only the West. Russia did not. Vladimir Putin did not kill Alexei Navalny. Vladimir Putin didn't even like to say his name because he was so insignificant. He's like, this guy doesn't register. He doesn't move the needle at all. But the West also recognized that Navalny wasn't moving the needle either because he's a convicted criminal in jail for life, and he's never coming out unless there's a trade. But here's the thing about the trade, because you might say, well, Scott, why wouldn't they just let the trade go forward? Because to release him, the CIA has to admit that Navalny was working for them the entire time. So now he's not a Russian opposition figure. He's just a simple CIA spy. And the other thing we know is that Navalny was writing letters to some of his friends and sponsors saying, I made a mistake going back, and I really would like a situation where I can get out of prison. I will leave Russia, and I will never come back to Russia, and I will not get involved in this opposition politics thing. I just want to be with my wife and my kids. I want to spend my life out. And the CIA is going, that ain't the contract, pal. You joined us. You took the money, and now you got to pay the price. And the price is, if you do that, your family, it's all done. Your daughter, even though she's a Stanford graduate, nobody will pick up the phone when she calls. She will not get the job that she wants. It's over for her. If you come back and you disappear into the crowd, you will spend the rest of your life sweeping out 7-Elevens, because that's the only job you're going to get in some remote corner of Nebraska. That's it. It's the work that you have. Your wife, she's going to be home. She's going to be a cat lady because no one will hire her. She's a nobody. Your daughter, your kids, life is ruined. But Frankie Five Angels, if you do what we ask you to do, your family will be taken care of. You got nothing to worry about, Frankie. And that's the deal the CIA made with him. CIA didn't want him released because it would be a huge embarrassment. Right now, the CIA can just maintain the car. Look, all you have to do is dig a little bit into Navalny, and it's clear. CIA, MI6, CIA, MI6. It's not a question. Everybody knows it. But because it's impossible for the mainstream media and the U.S. government to tell the truth about Russia, we can't admit that we've been working since we bought the first Russian election back in 1996. Most Americans remember Time Magazine, front page cover, the best election money can buy. We put Yeltsin in office for his second term. We bought an election that he should not have won. We've been interfering with Russian elections ever since that time. And Navalny is the proof that we were doing it in 2007, 2012, 2021. Navalny is the embodiment of American interference in Russian elections. And if this becomes public knowledge, then suddenly everybody's going to go, well, wait a minute. We've accused the Russians of interfering in 2016. That's a lie. We know it's a lie. We know the FBI made it up. We know Hillary Clinton made it up. But what you're really telling me is that the United States has been doing it nonstop since 1996. Yes, we have. Yep. And that's a conversation they don't want. So Navalny's dead. We now get to create the myth of Navalny. We have his beautiful wife now as the face of the resistance, and his family will be taken care of. The daughter's going to go and get a great job where she's going to be able to go through the, all the cocktail party circuit and be there. The brave face of Navalny's daughter, she's going to become very important. His son is probably going to move into his thing, get a foundation to sponsor him, and he's going to be promoting democracy and democratic values. It's all CIA paid for, people. These are CIA agents. Do not buy into the garbage. It's just the reality. But look, give the CIA credit. They offed the guy, and they've put in play their narrative, and the mainstream media is running with it, and the American sheep are buying into it.
That's right. One of the things you mentioned was Tucker's interview with Vladimir Putin. I want to get your opinion about that because I had some mixed opinions. One of the things I did find out during that interview that I was not aware of, I had no idea that Russia tried to join NATO. So that was a surprise to me. I learned a little bit more about Bill Clinton and Bush as well. But I had a little bit mixed reactions. I was glad the interview happened because I did learn some things that obviously mainstream media and our State Department is not telling us in reference to Russia and where they stand on certain issues. But also at the same time, I kind of was like, Tucker, going over there, obviously they're going to see you as a target. So when all of these attacks came towards Tucker Carlson and he had a follow-up interview and he said that he was surprised that his country was treating him this way. I was like, what did you expect to happen? You thought they were going to, clap or applaud you on the back? Like you went to talk to who they considered to be the enemy. But how did you feel about the interview?
Well, as somebody who's traveled to Russia to try and create peace and improve relations, and I know what happens when you do that. You come home and you're attacked viciously. I can say, Tucker, of course you were going to be attacked. You had to know this, and Tucker had to know it. Look, he's not stupid. He's a very smart guy. Let me start off again with a couple things. One, Tucker and I have a history, and I've been very upfront about this history. It's a history that dates back to his time as a CNN host of, do you remember Crossfire? CNN's
Crossfire.
Crossfire.
You wore the bow tie?
Yes, on the left,
yeah.
On the right.
Yeah.
And I was a guest on Crossfire a lot during the lead up to the Iraq War. And on one particular event, we had Paul Begala on the left, and on the right, Tucker Carlson. And so the interview is going okay. I just published a book about Endgame, about how to solve the Iraq crisis once for all. And Paul Begala is, even though I was attacking the Clinton administration and he was a Clintonite, he was respectful. We had a discussion. We laid the facts out. I thought it was very productive. Tucker was sort of quiet. He would come in a little bit, but then at the end, as we're running out of time, because it's a timed event. This is before a live audience in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. And Tucker suddenly puts a quote up from the book, and he reads the quote, and he says, "That contradicts everything you say. You're a hypocrite. You're this, that, and the other thing." And I said, "Tucker, I wrote the book. The paragraph before this and the paragraph after, if you add it, brings context, and what you think you're reading isn't what you're reading at all. No, you're a hypocrite, and that's all the time we have from the left, Paul God from the right, and we're done. Boom, blah, 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 bam." And I'm sitting there going, "You son of a..." I stood up and I came to him and I said, "I'm going to knock your teeth out," in front of the whole crowd. I said, "What you did is disgraceful. This isn't journalism. This was an ambush, and it's a dishonest ambush because you know damn well what was above it. You know what was below it. You're playing a game. I don't like this game. I'm going to beat the crap out of you right now." Security's grabbing me. Paul Begala saying, "Scott, don't do it. Don't do it." And the crowds, yeah, because they knew what he did. It was scum, human scum. And they led me off. And ever since then, if you told me Tucker Carlson, I say, I hope I meet him in a bar someday because I will headbutt him and then kick him into the oblivion. He's the worst person in the world. And I despise Tucker Carlson. I hated him. And I watched him go into Iraq and play soldier boy, this little, I got to be careful what I say, but he's posing with his CNN security crew with an AK-47. I'm like, you've never fired an AK-47 in anger in your life, you little turd. Now you're posing like it's something big, and you're going in and bragging about how you're cutting off Iraqis at a gas station in their country where America's occupied it, and you're cutting them off from the gas they need to survive because you're what? A white American coming in and exercising your privilege, you spoiled little frat boy. And I hated him, despised him. I still get angry about this, but about a year and a half ago, I get a phone call from, Max Blumenthal, Gray Zone, and his lovely wife, Anya. She calls me up. She says, hey, Tucker Carlson wants to talk to you. I said, I don't want to talk to him. I said, well, no, I don't like this guy. She says, he knows that. He knows you don't. He actually wants to talk to you. He wants to talk to you about Russia, but he also wants to apologize because he knows what he did was wrong. And I said, what I said is that, I said, are you telling me the truth? And she said, yes. And I said, well, I'm not a vindictive person. I said, that's not the conversation. If he wants to talk about Russia, I don't want it to be an apology. I said, tell him that I accept his apology and we don't have to ever talk about it again. Well, he called up, he apologized anyways. He was very gracious, very gracious. And I didn't have to say anything. He knew exactly the incident that I was talking about. He knows why I was angry, and he understands the fury behind it. He said, I was so wrong. You were so right. I apologize. I said, okay, we're done. We never have to talk about this again. Let's talk about Russia. And we had a series of conversations about how the media is getting it wrong on Russia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, last summer, late summer, I knew I was coming back to Russia in December. I was asked by some senior Russian people if I could get Tucker Carlson to join me on this trip. And the idea would be that there would be an interview with Vladimir Putin involved in this. And I reached out. Tucker never responded because I think Tucker was already in contact with his source. I don't know. Tucker has to tell that story, how that happened. But when Tucker didn't respond, I put a bid in. I said, look, if Putin's on the table, I'd love to have a conversation with Vladimir Putin. And they took it. And what they came back was that the president's administration respects you, thinks, you're doing good work and all that. But neither Putin nor Medvedev will be giving interviews at this time because of the sensitivity of the upcoming American election, and they don't want to be seen as interfering with American politics. And I went, all right, there's the answer. So I have to tell you, when I came back from Russia and suddenly Tucker Carlson's in Russia getting an interview with Vladimir Putin, I am jealous as hell. I'm just going to be honest with you, okay? I wanted that damn interview, and Tucker Carlson got it. And I said right up front to everybody, I said, he can't do this interview. He doesn't know enough about Russia. He's not serious enough. He's not a Russian historian. He doesn't know Russian culture. He doesn't know the Russian heart. He won't ask the right questions. He won't ask the follow-on questions. He won't be able to put in perspective anything Putin tells him. It's going to be a fiasco of an interview because he's going to come across as shallow and unprepared, and everybody will say, well, then you just gave Putin a platform, and you're all this kind of stuff. And that was my first response. But then I sat back because I am a very reflective person. I oftentimes will say things in the heat of the moment, and then I will sit down and open up a can of Diet Coke and take a sip and go, am I doing the right thing? Should I have said that? Was there something else I could have said? Am I taking the right approach? Let's take a step back. Let's calm down. Let's think about this. And I said, Scott Ritter interviewing Vladimir Putin. I may have generated couple 100,000 hits. Maybe I could have gotten a couple million hits on that. Would have been the biggest interview I ever did in my life. Maybe 10, 20 million people around the world would have seen this interview. But that's the only platform I can get. That's it. That maxes me out. Tucker Carlson is going to get 300 million minimum with the potential of 1 billion or more views. So I'm sitting there going, my whole reason for going to Russia is to educate the American people about Russia, to give Russia a voice in America, to listen to the Russians, then come back and talk about Russia so the Americans can say, oh, maybe they're not our enemy. Maybe Russia's not that bad. Maybe. I said, so no matter what, Tucker Carlson is achieving what I'm trying to achieve, getting a Russian voice heard by 1 billion people. And right off the bat, that's a victory because it doesn't matter what Tucker says. In fact, Tucker is so irrelevant in this whole thing, it doesn't matter. Vladimir Putin gives speeches over and over. I would tell you this. I've been following Putin. This is another reason why I wanted this, because I was ready for this interview. But I've been following him since he became president. I've been listening to his speeches. I've been reading things. I've been watching the videos, looking at his body language, all that stuff. I was ready for this. But, nothing he said in this interview, with some minor exception, when they talked about specifics that are current, the currency of the discussion was good, like about Evan Gershowitz and things of that nature. But the Vladimir Putin's opinion on history, he's spoken about this before. Everything Vladimir Putin talked about with Tucker Carlson, he said before, but he said it in a forum that is denied to the American people because the American people don't get to watch the Russian language interviews. The American people, most of them don't navigate through into the Kremlin website to get the transcripts of Putin's speech and then translate into English and then work their way through it with, a couple PhDs next to you to explain. When he says this, what's he talking about? Who's this Dostoevsky dude? Pushkin. I keep hearing Pushkin. Why is he important? The average American doesn't know but Vladimir Putin, anybody who follows him, the man knows his facts. There was I think it was a Polish leader that was talking about a discussion with Putin, and he said, maybe it was somebody from Estonia. I can't remember. He said, I'm gonna throw Putin a curveball here. We're gonna have a conversation, and I'm gonna bring up an obscure Russian writer, and I just want to watch Putin go, oh. And he brought it up, and Putin went, yeah, but in his third novel, when you get to chapter 9. The writer starts talking about, this, that, and the other thing. But if you go back to the second novel, and the guy immediately realized that Putin is the quintessential Russian leader. And what that means is he is Russia. He knows Russia. He's absorbed Russia. You can't throw Putin off because he has studied this topic. He has his own twist to things. We all do. We all have our biases. So we can all read a history book and talk about it. I mean, if you and I read a history of the development of the United States, I bet you, even though we're both smart people, if we sat down and have a conversation, you'd have a different take and I'd have a different take because we come at it from different positions. There's nothing wrong with that. It's beautiful, in fact, because we can educate each other about our different perspectives. Putin has a perspective, and it's important that the world got to hear it. And it doesn't matter that the world isn't composed of PhD Russian experts who can sit there and automatically identify. You didn't have to know about Russian history to look at Putin's eyes. We all read people. We saw his expressions. We saw how he leaned back. We saw how he leaned in. We saw his eyes. We saw him move his hands. We saw his hand movements. We were reading the man because that's what we all do for a living. We read people, some of us better than others. But Vladimir Putin was exposed to 1 billion people, 1 billion people who now are listening to him. And hopefully some of them, and even if it's only 10%, that's 100 million. I'm a Marine. I think the math is right. 100 million people, they're going to go in and start Googling what Putin said. Dostoevsky, the Russian soul. The Brothers Karamazov. I might want to read that. The Grand Inquisitor. Holy cow. And now they've become educated. This is what I always wanted to do. Tucker did it. Home run out of the park. I mean, I didn't want to have to say this. I really wanted Tucker to fail because I wanted to say, nah, I could have done better. No, Tucker knocked it out of the park. He accomplished this, and I know he knows what he was doing. Tucker's a smart guy. He may not be a Russian expert, smart guy. And then he went around and he, when I was there in May, I did one of these cute little video things where I was in a market and I bought stuff for the road trip, and I had the guy ask me, how much would this have cost you in America? And I said, this would have cost me $36 $36 to $40 in America. My daughter was there. Do you agree? Oh yeah, definitely. And it would have. we know it because we drive to New York City all the time. We stop in the gas station and we go in and we buy the snacks for the trip. We got $40 worth of stuff. It cost me $6 and change in Russia. I said, the prices are unreal, and they have everything. Literally, we were in the middle of nowhere, and this tiny little mini mart had everything, and you're just like, I thought this place is under sanctions. We went to cities where the economy is just thriving, full employment, cranes up, building everything. This is a nation under sanctions, and it's exploding. And I did this stuff, and I got maybe 20,000 views. Tucker Carlson pulls the most cheesiest, stupid McDonald's thing, and this cheesy, stupid, and it worked. See, that's the genius of Tucker Carlson, because he knows how to package something for an American audience, for the American audience he's trying to reach, and he succeeded. So God bless Tucker Carlson. I think he did a great job. He's the only one that could have pulled this off the way it got pulled off, and he scared the living daylights out of the establishment. The media was in a panic. So was the government. This is why Navalny is such a big deal, because Navalny now has given ammunition to Tucker's detractors, and they're starting to attack Jon Stewart. I mean, I used to love Jon Stewart. I have to be honest. I've been on his show. I was a guest once, and I used to watch it. I laughed. He's funny. But I watched what he did to Tucker, and I'm sitting there going, John, because I remember when Jon Stewart helped destroy Crossfire, helped destroy Tucker Carlson, because he went on as a guest. And I don't know what kind of language I'm allowed to use on your show, but he basically said that you're a dick.
Yeah, you're fine.
and Tucker Carlson like, well, I guess I am. But so Jon Stewart brought down Crossfire, terminated the show, and got Tucker Carlson kicked off of CNN. And so, he knows the game. Jon Stewart is a dick. What he did to Tucker in his show, saying that, yeah, food's more expensive in America. That's the price of freedom. No, John, it's not. It's the consequences of a bad economy. It's a consequence of bad leadership, which is the point that Tucker Carlson was trying to make. That if you have good leadership, you have a good economy, and people don't have to go bankrupt buying the basic necessities of life. And that makes you actually more free than the freedom that Jon Stewart's talking about, because it's not free if Tucker Carlson expresses a point of view, speaks, and he gets attacked by everybody trying to have a chilling effect to suppress him, to deny him a voice. I just tell people, we live in America where free speech is everything. It's the cornerstone of everything we do. And the solution to speech you don't agree with is not suppression. The Supreme Court has said so. 1927 decision. Louis Brandeis was the justice, and he basically said that the solution to bad speech is free speech, more speech. Have better ideas. You and I can disagree on something. All right. The solution isn't for me to call everybody and say, no, shut Sabrina down, deplatform her, get her off. I don't want her. No. The solution is, Sabrina, let's talk. Let's talk so everybody can hear. I'm going to put my ideas on the table. And if I believe you have bad ideas, then it's my job to put better ideas out there. And your thing is, Scott, I disagree with you, but I'm not going to shut you up. I'm not going to say no. My thing is, I'm going to let Scott put his ideas on the table, and then I'm going to put better ideas on the table. That's what free speech is all about. It's right. Mechanism to empower people with knowledge and information so they become informed citizens, so they can hold their elected representatives accountable for what they do in their name. But you can't do that if you're suppressing people. Jon Stewart is trying to suppress Tucker Carlson. The mainstream media is trying to suppress Tucker Carlson. Why? Because they're scared of what he did. They're scared. You can sit there and say you don't agree with Vladimir Putin, and that is your right. You can sit there and say, I don't agree with anything Vladimir Putin said, and that is your right. But you should then thank Tucker Carlson for allowing Putin's voice to be heard, because it's the greatest opportunity you ever had. If you truly believe this, if you think Putin's an idiot, man, Putin just committed to a whole narrative that you get to pick apart. The solution to bad speech is free speech, more better speech. But nobody can do that. Nobody can stand toe to toe with Putin. They don't want to do that because they don't have the ammunition. So their solution is to suppress what Tucker Carlson did, to make it somehow bad, to make it un-American, to make it unattractive. The mainstream media didn't say, go ahead and watch Tucker's interview and and then we'll talk about how bad it was. They said, don't watch it.
Yeah.
Watch it. That's not American, man. It's not the American way.
Well, and speaking of free speech, it brings me to my final question. Today is day 2 in the hearing for Julian Assange. How do you feel about that hearing, and what do you think is going to happen? Because I think we all know that the last thing we want is for Julian Assange to be extradited to the United States, because it's game over. Do you feel like he may get some type of a win here with this hearing in the UK?
I feel his lawyers have done a very good job. I'm not a lawyer, as I said. I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express, but logically speaking, I looked at the construct of their arguments, the depth of their arguments, the quality of their arguments, and a very solid case that they've put forward. The problem is the judge. The judge is British establishment who has a history of, in America, we would have this judge recused. Because the second the defendants start talking about the CIA and intelligence involvement and trying to suppress this and all that, the judge should have said, well, I used to advocate on behalf of MI6, the British intelligence service. I have a very close working relationship with them that's ongoing to the moment. And because of this relationship, people could rightly infer that I would be prejudiced against Assange in favor of the client I still have. But the judge didn't do that, which tells you that this is a foregone conclusion. It doesn't matter what the defense is going to do, I believe. I believe that Julian Assange is going to be extradited and he'll die. I think this is murder. The United States knows what it's doing, knows what it wants to do. It's designed to have a chilling impact on free speech, and it will be one of the greatest crimes perpetrated in broad daylight in front of everybody. And I'm very saddened by this, very saddened. I never met Julian Assange. To be honest, again, I try to be very honest. I never liked Julian Assange, to tell you the truth. You want to know why? Because I was an intelligence officer. And I'm the kind of guy that says, no, I don't want our secrets published there, because I know what it took to collect this information. I know the risks, the costs, the sacrifice it took for people like me to go out there and put it all on the line to gather this information. And I don't want it released. If we did something wrong, and I'm not denying that we did something, there are mechanisms that we're supposed to go through before it gets released to the public. So initially I thought WikiLeaks was the devil's work, literally the devil's work. But then I saw the video that they put out there, of the assassination of the Reuters film crew in Iraq. And first of all, that wasn't intelligence. That was evidence of a crime. There was no intelligence officer who put his life on the line to collect this information. There wasn't billions of dollars of taxpayers' money to get a technical solution to collect it. This was just a helicopter went out and murdered people. And it was classified, not because there were sensitivities about sources and methods. It was classified because it's a murder tape, snuff film, and we didn't want it shown. And Julian Assange did us all a huge favor by doing that. Julian Assange also released the diplomatic cables that prove that the United States is just lying through its teeth. The thing about classification is you can never use classification to avoid embarrassment. You classify something because there's a national security interests, and it usually deals with sources and methods or the intention of the government, some policy thing. But if the government does something wrong, you can't classify to shield that from the American public. The Supreme Court's weighed in on this over and over again. If you go back to the ruling about the Pentagon Papers, I think it was the United States versus the New York Times. The Supreme Court basically said, the Pentagon Papers have to be published because it exposes the lies of the government. This is the duty of the press to do this. And when I started doing that, I had a come to Jesus moment, so to speak. I'm like Paul in the desert, when I saw the light, and I'm like, oh God, okay, I get it now. I'm not very religious. I'm just using that as an example. But and I went, Julian Assange, he may be a son of a what. He may be an abrasive personality. I might not necessarily like the guy if I ever met him, but he's doing God's work. He's doing the right thing. He deserves our praise. He deserves our support. And I came over on the side. I started advocating for his release. Too late in the game. I get it. There's people out there who are well before me and they deserve all the credit because they knew what was going on beforehand. But as somebody who practices free speech, I have to tell you, this is a big deal. If you don't understand what happens to all of us if the government gets away with this murder, then you don't understand what's going on. This will have a chilling effect. The government is getting ready to kill somebody, assassinate him, because they know what the outcome is. 175 years in jail. Come on, man, that's a life sentence. He's not going to make it. They have deliberately broken his spirit with solitary confinement, playing stupid games, wrecking his health. He is a mental wreck. All you have to do is go study. In America, the courts have found that solitary confinement is a form of torture.
Mm-hmm.
They put somebody in solitary, you go insane. And they did it on purpose. They want Julian Assange to go insane. They want him to kill himself, or they're going to bring him to the United States and they're going to put him in a maximum security prison, and he's going to get limited access to general population. But when he does, dead. Yep. That's what they want. They're doing it on purpose. They want this to be a horrible death because they want people to sit there and go, I'm thinking twice about publishing this wonderful top secret document that somebody handed me that shows the United States government lied about working with ISIS in Syria. Now, it's in the American interest people, the interest of the American people to know that the United States helped create ISIS and used ISIS as a vehicle to promote American foreign policy objectives. And if you have a document that proves this, that document's going to be classified. There might be sensitive sources and methods involved in this, but the American people need to know this. They need to know the truth. And what's going to happen is people are going to say, no, we can't do this. The other thing that's going to happen is because we stop advocating for free speech, we stop advocating for our rights. For instance, important Fourth Amendment rights against illegal search and seizure. And we clear the way for what's happening right now. This FISA vote, the FISA court vote, they were going to re-empower these guys, give them more power, sweeping powers. The Constitution doesn't matter anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, when you stop defending the Constitution, it ceases to exist in terms of its impact. We stop defending free speech. We stop defending ourselves against illegal search and seizures. We no longer have any rights, none whatsoever. You say, Jon Stewart, my new favorite boogeyman, it's the price of freedom. No, John, we live in the most corrupt government. We literally, the American government's the single most corrupt government in the world today because, and I'll tell you why, because we set such a high standard and we don't live up to it. It would be one thing if we said, nah, we're not advocates of free speech. We actually believe that the government has a right to control speech and all that. I disagree with that, but at least you say they're not hypocrites. They're at least doing what they say they're doing. No, we don't believe in absolute protection against illegal search and seizure. We believe the government has a right to go in and take things on a presumption of guilt. And you're going, no, in America, you're not in America. Now you can say, I don't agree with that, but at least you can say they're not hypocrites. We are the single most hypocritical nation on the planet because we pretend to be one thing, but we function the other way. And the American people, may have always said, but at the end of the day, I'm protected by my constitutional rights. I don't know how many times I've heard that from people. You don't have any constitutional rights because A, you don't know what those rights are, and B, you're not actively defending those rights, and C, you're allowing other people to be prosecuted and persecuted for doing things that should be protected by your constitutional rights, but aren't. And this is the danger of what's going on. This is a tragedy. I met Julian Assange's brother. I met his father. Very people. They are devastated by this. I didn't get to meet his wife, but I've heard about her and I watch her. She is devastated by it. He has children he will never see again. And it's not just that. This is a man who was trying to do the right thing. He was trying to do, this isn't an evil guy who was out there trying to make money or corrupt he was trying to tell the truth to a public that needed to be told the truth. And he's going to die because of it. He's going to be murdered by the U.S. government.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for your time. I know you're a very busy person, but great discussion. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me on. I apologize for rambling on like that, but you pulled the string, and these are emotional topics.